Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Autodesk Virtual Academy, brought to you by your friends here at KETIV Technologies. I'm Nigel Mbayak, one of the customer success managers here at KETIV. Today, I'm joined by one of our good friends and colleagues here, Javier Chavez.
Hey, good morning. Good. How about yourself?
I'm doing okay, Jav. Doing okay. I'm excited for today's session. This is something that is often requested by the user base, and I feel like we just can't get enough of Content Center. We've gone over it a number of times. We'll kind of review some of the stuff that we've gone over before, but it gets brought up so much that, let's go ahead and review some of this. Let's go ahead and show some new things. And that's why Jav's here today, to show you all some more information about understanding and managing Inventor Content Center, why you should use it, the numerous ways you could store all of these files, and ultimately how to get the most out of your Inventor installation. Is there anything else you have to add, Jav, before we get started?
You know what, just the fact that, yeah, we have talked about it a number of times, so I'm going to try to put a different spin on it. But I also want to refer back to, previous AVA sessions, even talk about another session that's available to you guys. It's a bit longer, a bit more in depth. It's really, really good to give you guys all kinds of resources. So again, a different take. Hopefully you'll get something different out of it, if you've watched some of the other ones that we've done or anything else out there. And then you'll take all that information and hopefully, put a best practice for you, combining all those resources.
So without further ado, Jav, I'll let you take it away.
Okay, sounds good. So with that said, we're going to get started just talking a little bit about the agenda, right? We're going to give you guys a quick overview about what Content Center is, how it works. We'll talk about some resources as well, as I mentioned a little bit earlier. But the meat of this will be in the, the lower half of this, managing and modification, customization of your Content Center, right? So it'll go into, working with Vault just a little bit because, there's certain ways to manage your Content Center within Vault. And so we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And we'll give you guys a quick overview, right? So why do we want to use Content Center in the first place? If you saw the description of today's session, you probably already got some of this information, but the database, that Content Center database contains over 750,000 parts, okay? Plus features, okay? So what people don't realize is the Content Center actually contains features as well that you could use in parts. So if you need a certain type of a cutout, a rectangular cutout, you could probably just drag and drop it onto your part. Very little known, fact there in regards to that is that you actually have features. If you need a hole, you can drag and drop it there. There's probably easy ways to create that so it doesn't get used that much. But then another reason we use the Content Center is it's a quick way to find parts. Depending on how you launch it, how you start to utilize it, you can use keys to kind of filter out, well, look, I need a socket head cap screw, but I want to look for something with a certain diameter. And then it'll filter out all the socket head cap screws available within that diameter. And then you go on to the next criteria or key, which might be the length, the shaft length, and then it might be the thread type, right? So it should allow you to quickly find parts, okay? And then I think one of my favorite things, one of the best things I think in terms of using the Content Center are advanced placement options, okay? Simply using nuts and bolts gives you a bolted connection tool that allows you to basically not just insert one bolt, but insert the washers, all the fasteners that go with it, including the hole. If there's not an existing hole, it'll actually drill one out for you, right? So we'll take a look at some of those. We won't be able to take a look at all of them, but we'll take a quick peek at some of those in just a moment. All right. And last but not least in my little list here is changing the size or swapping out similar components is cake, okay? Normally, if you have to swap out one component for the other, one bracket for another, one motor for another, your constraints will most likely break unless they were just, generated from a very, very similar parts. Okay. With that said, right, let's take a quick peek at this. Right, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to Inventor, and I'll bounce back and forth here. But let's take a look at some of this. So jump in here to an existing assembly, right? And this contains there's a bit of stuff going on here, but this contains some tube and pipe components, and we'll start by just maybe placing from Content Center. Now, a couple things to note here is at the moment I'm using desktop content, so we'll talk about that in just a moment. But when I go to place, I have the option to place from, you know, folder, from vault in certain cases. But here's one way I could insert a Content Center component. So I'll go ahead and do that. And this is where I start to maybe filter out what I need. And if I'm looking at bolts or components here, I could simply start drilling in here and looking at stuff. I mentioned it was fairly quick to get to. There are search criteria here that'll help you whittle this down, but you can see this is how we easily get to, you know, 750,000 parts. There's tons of these just under this one category of hex head bolts. Okay, so there are filters here, and you could say, you know, if you're using ANSI, right? Let's just show ANSI, and that's it, right? And that whittles it down quite a bit, right? And there's also a search window. Okay, so there's advanced search here where you could say, okay, give it more criteria here and put it, specify very specifically, only look for hex head parts. Okay, so we're already there. There's already that criteria. But then you could also put in, you know, something here like the display name or maybe the family description contains the word metric or imperial or inch, right? So I'm going to put inch here. I'll add this to my search criteria, and I can tell it to search now, right? So this will get me to hex bolt inch very quickly, or anything else that contains those words, and I could certainly, you know, get to a point here where I add more criteria that quickly gets to what I need, right? So I'm not going to use this in this case. I could see the hex bolt that I want to use here right away, and it's just basically a really basic hex bolt, okay? So one of the things you'll be able to see here as I start to use it is there's a table attached to this. So we'll talk about this table, and if I turn it off, it goes away. But when I turn on the table, you'll see that this basically is every instance of that bolt. All the various sizes, configurations, you see that. And so you have a quick preview as to what's available. And you might even see in, you know, some of these libraries that, yes, I use, you know, ANSI hex bolt in imperial units, but they don't have the size I use. You know, there's this goes up to 4 inches, I believe. Yeah, 4 inches. And if you need something bigger, it might be in a different library like heavy duty hex head bolt. But still, you might find other libraries that are missing information or maybe missing a size. You simply add to this table. Okay, so we'll do that in just a little bit. But let's try this here. Okay, so hex bolt. There is a here that you want to be aware of. It's called auto drop, and the auto drop tool does that. It specifically, it automatically drops in the right size. Okay, it's on. It's not available in every single thing, but these are the advanced placement options I was talking about. So I'll double click here and I'll zoom in. Okay, and you can see for this hole, this default fastener is not the right size. So if you sit on this for just a second here, it'll go and find the right size based off of that nominal diameter. So again, you sit on that arc or circle, it reads the nominal diameter and it says, hey, that's you probably need a 1/2 inch fastener, right? So you could just place it out in space and just click and then, you know, add constraints. But again, some of these advanced placement options make it really easy to just click, right? And it's already constrained. There is a insert constraint already added in there. Okay. So here's the auto drop options. If you had turned that off, you wouldn't get some of these options. But it says follow pattern. That's interesting. So if there is, or you know, the holes were made in using a pattern, it should follow through and recognize pattern and match the pattern. So there's an option insert multiple. There's ways to manually change the size. There's the bolted connection. So this tool exists in our design accelerators, and it's another way to access the same functionality. However, I think instead of, showing it, to you up here, I'm just going to do it right here. Right? So I'll go ahead and apply this. Right? I do have an option here of the thread type. It does not read that if it's in there. And let me try this again, just because I meant to use the design accelerator. Okay, we'll let it read that. I'll click, and I'll click on this button instead of just applying it, right, and get into the design accelerator. Okay, so this is the design accelerator, the bolted connection design accelerator. It exists on this tab right here, and you have a bolted connection tool. That's the other way to launch this exact same thing. And there's, just like there is, 4 or 5 different ways to create a hole. It's very similar, except it's going to basically, put in the whole bolted connection. Okay, so I don't want to just leave it at the bolt. You define, maybe with this one, a start plane, which has already been selected here just by me picking on this. A circular reference, so that's the circular reference there that are red and made out to be 1/2 inch. And then a termination. Well, this has got to go through this plate and maybe the bottom. And I think if you see the bottom of this, it's just like a sheet metal bracket or something, and there is no hole there. Okay, so if I tell it, hey, go ahead and terminate here, it'll add a hole. Okay, so it's actually going to modify the part for me. It's going to add a hole. Now, if this is all I need, then I'm done. But I actually need more. I need washers underneath this. I need on top and on bottom, I guess. And I also need a nut to hold it, right? So when we look at this dialog box, right, these are some of the advanced placements. There's a double line here, just underneath my red line. And this represents the top of the connection. This represents the bottom part of the connection underneath the plate. Okay, so anything I add above the line goes on the top side. Anything I add below the line goes on the bottom side. So a bit more advanced, right? Let's go ahead and click Add Fastener. Between the hole and the head of the bolt, I need a washer. So it's looking at the content center and it's filtering out to just washers, right? But it is using the content center again. It's going to that library. So I'll just use a plain washer here. You can see it added in. It might extend the length of the bolt, or you could manually drag it here to do that as well. Okay. So I need fasteners underneath. I'll click underneath the double line. I'll add another simple plain washer. Okay. And then a nut to go underneath that. So underneath the washer, I'll click to add a fastener. And I'll put a simple hex nut here. Right. And in this case, since I started messing with this, it didn't quite extend the bolt. But you can see when I do this, it's using standard-based components. So, I'm going to use something that is not, out of whack with standards, and I'm not, creating something that's unique or custom. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and lengthen it here. I'm also going to tell it to follow the pattern. Okay. So you can see here, I'm getting 4 bolts for the price, or 4 bolted connections for the price of 1. Those are some of the advanced placement options I'm talking about. Okay. So in addition, just so you know, I mean, new features inside of Inventor allow you to place these directly in the assembly instead of creating a sub-assembly. So that's a new feature. If you guys are interested in some of the new features and going over them in 2021, you have the option again of keeping, a sub-assembly with all these components, or breaking them out like we did here as individual components attached directly to the assembly. So that's new. I'll make a reference for you guys to look at. Okay, and then if I wanted to change sizes, it'd be pretty easy. I mean, you can right-click on some of these components and change the size immediately here, right? Or maybe change the thread type or something, and it'll just go back to the being constrained exactly where it is because it comes from the same family. So swapping these out is easy. And there's an option to replace all. The advantage of having maybe a sub-assembly is you can replace all of these things all at once. So I'll go ahead and cancel out of this. And let's get back to the presentation portion of things here. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look here, right? So why use it? You know, we can remove, or why customize it? We can remove unnecessary content. You see, I'd have filter, you know, to ANSI. Well, I don't use ISO, I don't use DIN, I don't use Japanese International Standards, so I can easily customize the content center and filter that stuff out. And even within a family of nuts or bolts or piping or whatever, there could be sizes I don't want users to reference, right? To put in, because we just don't use them. Or maybe a wall thickness on a pipe that we just don't use. So if you want to eliminate those type of mistakes, you can filter out the things that you don't want your users to use. This is kind of a CAD admin thing, right? And you want to document this, whatever you do to the content center, keep, you know, backup copies of some of your source files, do all that good stuff. But these are the basic reasons, right? Starting with this, removing unnecessary content, right? So you might want to customize the property. So these, you know, the guys at Autodesk have no idea where you buy your parts from or what your internal part numbers are. So they use a generic one. This is the most common request we get in terms of customizing the content center. And so you're going to want to customize those properties like part numbers, maybe file names, or maybe materials, okay? And performance is another one, okay? So if there's less stuff for the content center to sift through when you're launching it, it's going to perform better, right? Now, this isn't as big an issue now as it was in the past, initially when this first came out, but I still see a significant improvement in performance when I have just, instead of 750,000 parts to sift through, I just have maybe 10,000, right? That's a drastic difference. So, all right. So some resources for you guys. We mentioned the fact that, you know, this is something we've talked about a number of times. I don't want to repeat a lot of what we've said. Instead, I want to add on and build on to these other sessions. So Nigel is going to put some links on the in the chat to share with you guys. If you guys can, you know, maybe copy them and paste them somewhere or bookmark them. But this is one of them, okay? And it's the Inventor 2016 Content Center Part 1 and Part 2. It's 2016, it's older, but it is good, okay? There's 2 parts to that. So take a look at that. Again, copy and paste them somewhere, bookmark them. And then there's another one, again, on our AVA sessions, how to customize your Inventor Content Center. That was done by Cameron. He goes very, very in-depth on customizing the database. I'm not gonna go as in-depth. I don't think I need to. I'm gonna talk a little bit more about managing them in just a moment. But really, really good session. Altogether, all these resources should help you build the best content center you could possibly build, right? The most efficient way to do this for your organization. Okay. So the other thing, the other resource I looked at are productivity training sessions, right? So I looked through there, and again, Cameron did one of these not that long ago that gets really, really in depth, you know, more than the 45 minutes or so that we spend here in AVA. This is probably a good 2 to 3 hours. I don't remember exactly what the length is on Content Center. Okay. So another link there. Take a look at those in the chat. Copy and paste them. These are really, really good resources. Okay. So with that said, let's move on and talk about how the Content Center works. Right. So these parts, every single part that's in the Content Center, and there's only parts, there's no assemblies, unfortunately, it doesn't support assemblies. But these all get generated from an iPart. So if you're familiar with iParts, that's how these all got generated from originally. You know, somebody at Autodesk basically is going to go through the same process that we're going to go through when we customize our parts to generate all those bolts. They're very disciplined about it. They've got, you know, tons of parameters that may or may not be useful to you, but that really help you control that component. Okay. So the way it works is, you know, when you're working with an iPart, that there's a table there, and it generates a family table in the Content Center database when you publish it there. Okay. So you just have to get it there. Okay. And in the iPart model that this starts off with creates what's called a family template. Okay. So there, for every family that you see of components like a nut or bolt, there is one part that gets used. And what happens is when you actually choose a part in the content center, like I did a second ago, a nut or bolt, a pipe, an O-ring, okay? It takes the parameters in the table, quickly applies them to the family template file, right? And sort of does a save as and generates a new file in the content center folder, right? Or a custom folder. You always have the option when you're doing this to, just throw it in a standards folder where it becomes read-only, you can't change them, or in a custom location where you can give it its own name, put it anywhere you want, and you have write access to it. So again, it's normally read-only in a content center folder, or in a custom folder, it becomes read-write, and you could do a lot of stuff with that after the fact. Unfortunately, a lot of people have standard components, and the only thing they have to work with to generate like custom part numbers within that part is they create their own library in a custom folder. And they have to remember, if I've already generated a 1/2 inch by 2 inch bolt with coarse threads, they have to go and remember to go back to the library first, see if somebody's already created one, and if not, then they have to generate. It just becomes a mess. Okay, so this is again one of those reasons that justifies why we might want to manage and create our own custom content center library. Okay, so with that said, let's go and continue here. Right, let's talk about how we're going to manage these files. Okay. There's lots of stuff to manage here. I mean, you got several different types of components, and on top of that, you're going to need to make a decision on whether you're going to use desktop content or vault-based content. So desktop content, I don't think there's a lot of you guys out there that will be using it. It'd be interesting in the chat if you guys can kind of let us know, if you guys are using desktop content versus vault-based. But desktop is meant to be used typically for a single user. It's just you. Okay, that content center resides, the database resides on your own computer. Okay, there's no or very little restrictions on who can make changes to that content, and it's less secure. Now, there's ways to share the desktop content with other users and put that desktop content somewhere on a shared folder, right? Copy the libraries and share it with everybody, and you'll be able to create your own custom content center library. But anybody will be able to browse out to that folder and make changes, maybe some unwanted changes. It's less secure, okay? So if it's vault-based, it's much better. You have to have very special permissions to be able to edit those files, okay? We also want to filter out, unused libraries or information within those libraries, right? Or within the content center. So there's filtering the unused libraries. Later on, we'll talk about, creating custom libraries and filtering, information out of that. But just getting rid of stuff you don't use, there's a big plus to that, okay? We do this through the IPJ or project file, okay? And then at some point in managing these, you're gonna probably need to create your own custom library. Now, this is something, a new take on this that you may or may not have heard of, but I recommend creating a production content center library and a test library, okay? So you do want to sort of isolate, what you're doing, sort of experiment with it, and then, make your modifications in that test library, okay? So make modifications, customize in your test library, and we can set this up in such a way that users, typically your typical user, just does not see your test library. They only see production, right? And so when you're ready and you've tested it out, you've vetted out this information, you can copy or move, I should say, that family of parts into your production library, okay? Last but not least, have a backup plan. So whether you're using desktop content, find a way to back up your custom libraries, okay? If it's on Vault, those custom libraries automatically get backed up when your vault gets backed up. So super important. This becomes, information that's unique to your organization. I can always restore the default libraries that come with Autodesk. They're out there on the web. You can just download them again if you lose them. I cannot restore your custom libraries unless you back them up. Okay? So come up with some kind of backup plan. If it's desktop, have your IT maybe back up a folder or something like that. But if it's vault-based, make sure you have a vault backup. Okay, so let's take a quick peek again inside of Inventor and see about some of these things that we need to manage, right? So I'm going to get out of this file for just a second, okay, and I'll keep this information here, right? And that dialog, by the way, I just kind of clicked through it. It shows you in 2021 why we're saving, right? Because there's new parts, or because we're upgrading to the latest format of Inventor, or there's API changes. I skipped through it really quick, but again, another new feature, right? So first things first, I'm gonna go to Tools, and this is an application option. I'm gonna go to Tools, Application Options, and there is a special Content Center tab here, okay? And it lets me know, hey, me as a user, I'm using desktop content. So even if I wanted to use a vault-based Content Center, I'm not. You as somebody who's managing this needs to go out to every machine and make sure they're using the right option here, okay? So while I'm at it, right, I'll go here to this location. I'll show you just something about these libraries, right? I'm gonna go ahead and bring up a new Windows Explorer window. There we go, and I'll go there, right? So these are the libraries that come with the software. If you simply copy these to an F drive, a G drive, a map drive that everybody has access to, you can point users to these, okay? And if you want to do some kind of security, like there's a custom library here called My Library, you could start to work with Windows security and add permissions. But now you're getting into IT's kind of role here, and it becomes a little bit more difficult. You really have to know who these users are, how to get to them. You might not even have permission to do that on the shared network drive. So it becomes a little bit harder. Okay, so these are the libraries. They're less restricted, and I'm going to go ahead and tell it, hey, we're going to start using the Vault Server version of the Content Center. Okay, and some of those videos outlined, hey, you have to go download these and get these installed. But once they're there, they're there. Okay. So, okay, I'm now using Content Center. Okay. Now, the other part of this is in this project file, and I'll take a quick peek at this project file here. I'm going to go to Projects. Okay, and I'm using a Vault project. I currently have it checked out so that I can make changes to it. But I am using a Vault project here, and when I click to the right, when I'm set to this, it'll ask me to log in, and that's another thing, right? Administrators have access to edit the Content Center files, to edit, create new libraries, things like that. You could give users, just a regular user, the ability to create new Content Center files or Content Center libraries, or edit the library without giving them full admin access. So there is a specific role you can add to them for that. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. I'm going to be able to do some of the things I need to do. But regardless of whether you're using desktop or the Vault Content Center, the only difference is one asks you to log in and verify your credentials, the other one does not. Okay, so we start to see that when I'm using this BAC Mono project, right, these are the libraries I can use. Okay, I've already filtered out these Russian standards, these IDF ones, these Japanese international standards. And so if I want to hide some of these because I just want to remove clutter, I can remove ISO. If I don't use mold parts, there are standard mold components here for plastic injection molding, right? I don't want to use those. I can start to remove that and they'll see less, right? Keep in mind, this is the project that all my users use as well. So I'll check it back in at some point, and I'll make sure that that they only see what I want them to see. Okay, so ideally, I think it would be kind of cool if we could have just our library and our library only, right? But that may or may not make sense for you. So let's start first by just taking a look here and seeing what's happening. So it does tell me what server I'm logged into. It shows me if for some reason a library is missing, it shows up in red. You can see my library is missing. So let's not even go there and show that. Okay, so I filtered some of these out. I'm going to log into the Vault server and create a new library. So I'm going to choose, well, I've already, I guess, saved some of those settings. No, it's asking me to save. So let's go ahead and save those. Right? But I'm remoted into the server. And again, now on the console, you have to do this once and create your own libraries. I'm going to create 2 of these. Okay. So on the left-hand side, if I expand libraries here, here's my libraries. I'm going to right-click and create a brand new library. Okay. So all these have yellow locks on them. They're read-write or read-only. Sorry, read-only. But I'm going to put a name here, and I'm going to call this my KETIV production. All right, I'll click OK. It'll create that. And then I'm going to create a KETIV test library. So I wish you could create 2 at the same time. You can't. So we'll give it just a second. And there it is. It's done, ready to go. There we go. We'll also create a KETIV test library. All right. So when this is done, I'm going to come back to my machine, right, that represents a user's machine. And let's go and filter this out a little bit more. Okay. So for production, remember this is my production project. I might filter out everything here, right, and just use my one production library. Okay. They'll see a whole lot less components when they work with this. So I might take off all these standard stuff here, right, and create my own version of everything, because I think with almost all of this stuff, I want my own part numbers. So this is my production project, okay? And I'll go ahead and save this. Okay, now what we'll want to do is create another project for CAD admins, okay? One that the users can't see. And if I come back to Vault here for just a second, I'm going to go ahead and log in. And there's my server name there. Okay. All right, I'm going to browse to where my project file is. And you can see this is the one that users use, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to where that's located, and I'm just going to make a copy of it. I could do a save as. There's a way to do that. I'm just going to make a copy of it here. Okay. And this is one that I'm going to want to hide from other users. Okay. So maybe I'll call it BAC, Content Center editing. Okay. And there it is. I have this other, project just for that. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and browse and open that. Okay. And for this, this is the one for the CAD admin. We're going to add anything we could possibly use, including, our KETIV test, right? So I know I'm going to be dealing with ANSI, maybe some DIN here, the routed systems or the tube and pipe, some sheet metal components. And these are some of the ones that, we could possibly copy and use. So I'm going to leave it at that, right? Just these. Okay, I don't use mold stuff ever. I don't use ISO, but I might copy some of these other ones. So it's filtered even for me, right? There we go, and I'll go ahead and save those changes. And so I have this this editing project file here that's going to let me, now customize the way I need to. Okay. So I'm not going to get to the customization part of it just yet. I want to come back to my presentation and talk about a few things, but that's what's on the order next. So